Welcome. Today we're diving deep into some really challenging source material from Ministry Revealed. Our mission here is to unpack this pretty huge claim they make. They're saying that centuries of biblical confusion, all the splits between denominations, the arguments over end times, pre-trib, mid-trib, post-trib, they argue it all boils down to one single fundamental misunderstanding. A mistake that, they say, can be corrected. All right, so let's try and unpack this. The source material argues that the church, like the entirety of it, has missed a key revelation. About prophecy, yes, but even about creation itself. And all because we've been looking at things through, well, the wrong lens. A single mistaken perspective.
That's right. And that perspective is what the source Ministry Revealed calls the lens of Matthew. According to them, the confusion starts when we take Matthew's gospel, specifically his end times discourse in chapter 24, and we apply it universally across the board to the entire church. But see, the source insists Matthew was writing primarily to the Jewish people, the house of Judah. So applying his specific timeline to everyone else, well, that's where things get tangled.
So imposing Judah's specific timeline onto everyone else.
Exactly. And the biggest consequence of using just this Matthew lens, it's huge. It basically forced the whole Christian world into thinking there's only one 7-year period of tribulation ahead. But the sources, they reveal something different. Not 7 years. They talk about 2 sets of 7 years.
Wait, 2 sets?
Yes, a total of 14 years. Plus, there's an initial escape period before those 14 years even start for a very specific group.
14 years instead of 7. I mean, that doubles the timeline. That completely overhauls standard eschatology, doesn't it?
It really does. A complete rethink.
Okay, so let's start right at the foundation then. Why does this Matthew lens, looking just through Matthew 24, cause such a massive error? How does it lead to centuries of splits over pre, mid, post-trib?
Well, it comes down to identifying the audience.
Yeah.
You know, when the church bases its foundational teaching on Matthew, especially Matthew 24, it essentially gives itself the eyes of Judah. Matthew's gospel is the king's gospel. It's written with a Jewish audience in mind, focusing on the kingdom, their Messiah king, their physical restoration.
Okay.
So when you take that specific kind of narrow timeline meant for them and you stretch it to cover everyone, you end up forcing 3 very different groups with 3 different destinies into one single box, one timeline.
3 distinct groups.
Yes, this is absolutely critical. The source identifies 3 distinct groups, and understanding them is the key to unlocking the whole prophetic timeline they present.
Okay, lay them out for us.
All right. First, you've got the house of Judah. These are the physical descendants of Jacob, you know, the Jewish nation today. They're the main audience for the Gospel of Matthew.
Got it. Group 1, Judah, Matthew.
Second, there's the house of Israel. Now, this term gets used different ways, but here it often refers to the sleeping church. Think of it as the bulk of the worldwide body of believers, Christians generally, including Gentiles who've been grafted in. They are the target audience of Mark's gospel.
Okay, group 2, the broader church, the house of Israel, Mark.
And third, there's a more exclusive group, the bride of Christ. These aren't just believers. They're described as those walking in, well, total obedience guided directly by the Spirit of God, a deeper relationship. They're the audience for Luke's gospel.
Luke, Mark, Matthew. 3 gospels, 3 groups. Bride, sleeping church, house of Judah.
So we're not just talking about different theological viewpoints on the same events anymore. You're saying the sources claim these are 3 distinct audiences, each getting their own prophetic path. Precisely. Separate paths, separate timelines. And here's where it gets, well, really interesting. The source, Ministry Revealed, contends that because there are these 3 groups, all 3 of those major end-time viewpoints, pre-tribulation, mid-tribulation, and post-tribulation, they're actually all correct.
Wait, how can they all be correct? They contradict each other.
They seem to contradict if you assume one event, but they don't if they're describing separate events for these separate groups. Each viewpoint correctly observes part of the whole picture, but mistakes it for the entire picture because they're only looking through one lens, usually Matthew's. The sources lay this out in what they call the 777 truth, a structure based on these 3 groups.
Okay, so maybe the centuries of arguments were unnecessary, if everyone's right, just about different people.
That's the implication. It reframes the whole debate.
All right, let's walk through this 14-year structure then. How does it break down for each group?
Okay, first up is Luke's discourse, addressed to that bride of Christ group. Their timeline involves what the source calls the pre-trib escape. Now, this isn't the mass rapture mini-picture. It's described as an escape, maybe a 40 or 50-day window that happens before the real tribulation, the travailing, officially kicks off. Luke 21 is key here. It says, it's only for those accounted worthy to escape all these things. So conditional.
Okay, so an escape before the 7 years start for the Luke group, the bride. What's next?
Next comes Mark's discourse. This is aimed at the sleeping church, the house of Israel, the general body of believers. This group, according to the sources, does go through the first 7 years of tribulation, specifically the period known as the seals in Revelation.
The seals period.
Their removal happens after those 7 years of seals. The source identifies this as the mid-trib rapture. This is often linked to the great multitude seen in Revelation chapter 7. It happens late in that 7th year of the seals, just before the next phase, the trumpets, begins.
So Luke's group escapes entirely beforehand. Mark's group, the majority of Christians maybe, they experience 7 years of seals and are raptured kind of midway through the total 14-year period.
Exactly, that's the structure. Which leaves us with the third group and the final 7 years. This brings us back to Matthew's discourse. Matthew 24. This is exclusively for the house of Judah, the Jewish people. They enter the second 7-year period, the final, more intense phase, the 7 years of trumpets.
The trumpet judgments, okay.
This period culminates in the event most people think of as the second coming, the post-trib return of the Lord, feet down, literally on the Mount of Olives, as prophesied, happening at the sounding of the last trumpet.
Luke pre-trib escape before year 1, Mark mid-trib rapture after year 7, Matthew post-trib return after year 14. That lays out 3 distinct timings. But the big pushback, is always going to be that the Gospels are just different perspectives on the same single 7-year event, not 3 separate timelines. If ministry revealed is right, we need some solid proof from the texts themselves that Matthew, Mark, and Luke cannot be describing the same event. What specific examples do they give?
They point to several textual discrepancies that they argue just don't line up if it's one event viewed differently. A really strong one is the sign of Jonah.
Okay, the sign of Jonah.
In Matthew, Jesus says the sign will be like Jonah in the belly of the whale 3 days and 3 nights in the earth.
Right.
That's Matthew, speaking to the Jews, emphasizing resurrection.
Mm-hmm.
But listen to Luke. Jesus says he would be a sign as Jonah was a sign to Nineveh. That sign was Jonah preaching a warning for 40 days before destruction. Luke's audience, the bride, gets a warning sign, an escape window.
Okay, 3 days versus 40 days, different signs.
And then there's Mark. Mark flatly states, no sign will be given to this generation.
No sign at all.
No sign. So how can these 3 passages describe the same moment, the same promise, if one gives a 3-day sign, one applies a 40-day warning, and one explicitly says no sign? The source argues they can't. They must be for different audiences at different points in the timeline.
Yeah, that is hard to reconcile as just perspective. Okay, that's compelling. What about the actual coming, the return or rapture itself? Any linguistic clues there?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
Look closely at the language used for the coming of the Son of Man. The prepositions are tiny words, but they make a huge difference here. Matthew 24 says, he comes on the clouds. The Greek there is epi. It suggests arrival upon, like stepping onto a platform, a full visible public arrival. Think lightning flashing from east to west, seen by everyone. Fits that final physical post-trib return for Judah.
Okay, on the clouds for Matthew's group.
But look at Mark 13. It says, he comes in the clouds, plural. And Luke 21 is even more specific. He comes in a cloud, singular. Both Mark and Luke use the Greek preposition in, meaning in or within.
In the clouds versus on the clouds.
Exactly. The source argues that coming in a cloud, or in clouds, refers to the rapture events, the pre-trib escape, and the mid-trib rapture, where Christ remains somewhat veiled, hidden within the cloud cover, pulling people up to meet him in the air. Only Matthew's description, on the clouds, depicts that universally visible, earth-shattering return.
So you're saying even the great multitude rapture, the mid-trib one for Mark's group, millions of people potentially. The rest of the world might not see him coming like lightning. They just see the aftermath, people gone.
That's the idea. It's a more concealed event for the bride, Luke, and the sleeping church, Mark. Only the final return for Judah, Matthew, is the undeniable global spectacle.
Okay.
And this distinction, this separation, also helps clarify some tricky timing issues in the book of Revelation itself.
Like what?
We'll take Revelation 12, verse 5. Many traditional pre-trib folks point to the man-child being caught up to God and his throne as the pre-trib rapture.
Right, I've heard that.
But the sources highlight a problem. Look at verse 2. The woman is already travailing in birth, pained to be delivered. That travailing is the tribulation period. So if the catching up in verse 5 happens after the travailing starts in verse 2, it can't be pre-tribulation, can it?
Okay. The timing within the chapter itself suggests it's during the trouble.
Precisely. Ministry Revealed argues Revelation 12.5 isn't the pre-trib escape for Luke's group at all. They say it actually depicts the mid-trib rapture for Mark's group, happening after the seven seals have run their course during the tribulation. The true pre-trib escape for the bride, they argue, has to happen before any of that travailing begins, aligning perfectly with passages like 1 Thessalonians 5, which talks about believers not being appointed to wrath but obtaining salvation, escaping that period entirely.
That clarifies the Revelation 12 timing significantly. Okay, let's connect this back. This huge prophetic restructuring. The source claims it also solves a centuries-old puzzle within Judaism itself about the Messiah's role. Two Messiahs.
Yes, this is a really fascinating piece of the puzzle, how it ties back. Ancient Jewish thought, wrestled with two different pictures of the Messiah found in their scriptures. There was the suffering servant figure, often called Messiah ben Joseph, son of Joseph. And then there was the conquering king figure, Messiah ben David, son of David, from the royal line.
Right, the suffering Messiah and the ruling Messiah.
Yeah, and they debated how one person could be both, or if they were two different figures. Christianity, of course, says Jesus is the one ultimate Messiah who fulfills all roles. What Ministry Revealed suggests is that Christ is both, absolutely. But he fulfills those two primary roles in relation to the two main groups who go through parts of the tribulation timeline. He came the first time as the humble, suffering servant, Messiah ben Joseph, the shepherd looking for his lost sheep. This corresponds, they say, to his role towards the house of Israel, the broader church, Mark's group.
Okay, Messiah ben Joseph for the Mark Church group.
But he will return later, visibly, powerfully, as the conquering king, Messiah ben David. This is the Messiah the Jewish people, the house of Judah, are still anticipating. He returns to gather them, rule, and oversee things like the Third Temple during that final trumpets era. That's his role for Matthew's group.
So the failure to separate the Gospels, Mark from Matthew, meant the church conflated these two distinct roles and comings into just one future event.
That's the argument. Bundled them together, missing the sequential fulfillment for the different houses.
It's like a pattern repeating this separation. You mentioned earlier it even goes back to creation, a creation fractal.
Yeah, the sources propose that this three-part structure, Luke Bride, Mark Church, Matthew Judah, isn't just in prophecy, it's embedded in the very fabric of creation, like a repeating pattern, a fractal. The traditional view, again, influenced by that Matthew lens, saw basically one primary timeline for humanity, 7,000 years, mirroring the 7 days of Genesis creation week, Adam's timeline.
Okay, the standard view.
But the sources say, hold on, you have to differentiate within Genesis 2, corresponding to the three groups. Luke, representing the bride and the spirit, corresponds to the very initial, almost instantaneous spirit creation, things happening in a flash, like days passing quickly.
Spirit creation. Okay.
Mark, representing the house of Israel and the sunlight, corresponds to the light creation. This is a longer cycle, maybe where a day is as 1,000 years. A 7,000-year cycle tied to Christ's work of redemption for the house of Israel.
A 7,000-year cycle for Mark's group.
And finally, Matthew, representing Judah in the flesh, corresponds to the flesh-Adam creation. This is the 7,000-year timeline we usually think of, the one we are currently living within. Adam, 7 days, 7,000 years. So the sources claim the full picture isn't just one 7,000-year age, but more like 7,000 years, Adam, Matthew, nested within another 7,000 years, crease mark. It's bigger.
So 7,000 plus 7,000, not just 7,000 total.
That's the implication. The bundling error, failing to see the three aspects, spirit, father, lights, and flesh, Adam, as distinct but related cycles, collapsed our understanding of both creation time and prophetic time. Missed the 777 structure in both.
Wow, it's pretty astounding. The claim that one interpretation error, focusing too much on Matthew, could cascade into needing a total overhaul of time, Messiah, end times, everything. So let's bring it together. What does this all mean for people listening right now? What's the big takeaway?
Well, the core message from Ministry Revealed seems to be this. If we can just take off those Matthew lens glasses and properly separate the synoptic gospels according to their intended audiences, then all those seemingly contradictory prophecies, the pre, mid, and post-trib viewpoints, they suddenly click into place. They aren't contradictions. They are all true descriptions of real, distinct events happening to three specific groups: the bride, the sleeping church, and the house of Judah, spread across that defined 14-year framework.
Okay, so the final picture is precise. Group 1, the bride, Luke's audience, gets the pre-trib escape maybe 40, 50 days before the first 7 years begin.
Correct.
Group 2, the sleeping church, Mark's audience, goes through 7 years of seals and gets the mid-trib rapture after year 7.
Yeah.
And Group 3, the House of Judah, Matthew's audience, goes through the final 7 years of trumpets and sees the post-trib return after year 14.
That's the structure they lay out. 3 groups, 3 timelines, 3 destinies within that 14-year period. And, this clarification, this shift from a 7-year to a 14-year model, it carries a really critical implication for right now, for the near future.
How so?
Well, the sources look at prophecies like Hosea 6, which talks about the Lord reviving Israel after 2 days, generally interpreted as 2,000 years. Now, if you assume, say, a 33 AD crucifixion, 2,000 years points towards a final return around 2033.
Okay, 2033 as an endpoint based on Hosea.
Right. Now, if you're stuck in the traditional 7-year tribulation model, you'd subtract 7 years from 2033. That means the tribulation couldn't possibly start any earlier than 2026, right?
Yes, simple math. 2033 minus 7 is 2026.
But if the real timeline is 14 years, not 7.
Then you subtract 14 years from 2033.
Exactly. Which means that first 7-year period, the seals targeting Mark's group, wouldn't start in 2026. It would have to start much, much sooner for that 2033 endpoint to hold true.
Significantly sooner.
Which definitely raises an urgent question, doesn't it? If this 14-year timeline is correct, what does that imply about how close the beginning of these events might actually be? Much closer than many might think.
A fascinating and frankly mind-bending deep dive today, exploring source material that truly challenges long-held assumptions about prophecy, time, everything. We really encourage you, if this intrigued you, to explore this structure further for yourself. Thanks so much for joining us on this deep dive.